back at WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. It is off-season in the football, which means there is no off-season, which means the draft's a couple of weeks away. I see this guy from time to time traveling around the country. I was hoping to see him later in the month as Mick Jagger would shake his 75-year-old ass down at the Gator Bowl. But instead, alas, I get points back on my airline miles, and Rick Ballou and I will have to bend the elbow, maybe at the, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, or maybe at a Jaguars game somewhere down the line. He has been my friend for going on a quarter of a century now. We were colleagues together at Sporting News Radio and One-on-One Sports Flash. Back at the turn of the century, you can find him at Ballou 1010XL. He's a smart guy. He began up in New England. When they were losers up there, he went to Chicago, did his time, and he now spends time in Jacksonville, Florida, running around with the Jaguars, talking sports, hitting a golf ball, watching the Red Sox someplace where you can do it under a palm tree. Ballou, I always say it, man. You're one of the good ones, one of the smart ones. You had it all figured out. You went to Jacksonville, man.
No doubt about it. I think the best thing in my life was leaving Boston at the ripe age of 18, seeing that magical city in the rearview mirror as I pulled out of there for Tallahassee and Florida State. And I haven't left, as you pointed out. Those 7 years in Chicago were fun, but as the late Papa Joe Chevalier used to say, I mean, my goodness, the sun goes down at 3:30 in the afternoon. So I love it here, just kind of flip-flopping through life, if you catch my drift.
It's cold as hell out here in Chicago, Ballou. It's not like York, Pennsylvania. Yeah, that's my best Papa Joe.
Man, these trains are holding everyone up. I'd be like, Papa, if they want these trains, man, the traffic's already just ridiculous. Can you imagine how much worse it would be if all these people were out driving around as well?
I love that you just dropped Papa Joe Chevalier just smack dab in the middle of this segment, because there's never a time I think of him where I don't smile, other than the fact that he still owes me a steak from Burn's Steakhouse because he lost the Steelers-Ravens bet, and I'm never going to collect that steak. But I collected it anyway because I went last year with Ryan Jensen. He picked up the bill. So we honored Papa Joe. We completed the deal. We even got a little dessert upstairs on him. So all is well with that. Look, I called you mainly because the Foles Flacco thing sort of happened. I know you're down there with the Jaguars. I'm just trying to get level set on everything happening in the offseason. I need a scorecard around here. I mean, no Flacco, no Suggs, no Mosley, no Weddle. Earl Thomas is coming in. We got a Hall of Famer coming to play for the Ravens. And Nick Foles is going to go down and be the quarterback of the Jaguars. Give me, I mean, you do sports radio for a living down there. Where was that Flacco-Foles Bortles debate over the last 2-3 months?
Yeah, Foles was the guy. You knew Bortles was going to be moved along. It just didn't work out, and it wasn't entirely his fault. I mean, Leonard Fournette missed 6 games. They lost 4 of their offensive linemen, really 3 to an injury. Cam missed 1 game, but, the best wide receiver went down. Their tight end went down, so they were just broken offensively, and they just needed to go in a different direction. When they added John DeFilippo as the offensive coordinator, he had that relationship with Foles a couple of years ago as a quarterback's coach in Philadelphia. So if you dotted the I's, that was the move that was going to happen. And, I thought back at the Combine when Doug Marrone came out and said how, you want a quarterback who's there, then everyone else can catch up to him as far as his knowledge of the offense. Obviously, that meant they weren't going the way of a rookie in the NFL draft. Now, I rather would have had him, pulled that off and gone for Dwayne Haskins, something along those lines, because I'm looking towards the future. Here's a 30-year-old now coming in, and the only thing I wonder about, Nasty, is that here's a guy who's hoisted a Lombardi. He's also hoisted a Roselle. He's been the MVP of the Super Bowl, and now he gets paid. Is he going to have that same drive to succeed the way that he has? He's also been a backup quarterback for a reason. I mean, we all agree Carson Wentz has got untapped potential, but we're still talking about a backup in the NFL. All of a sudden, you throw $88 million at, and now is the starting quarterback here in Jacksonville.
Well, he's a special guy. I mean, I was at the Super Bowl party in Minnesota last year. I had a lot of friendships on that Eagles staff, from Joe Douglas and Torrey Smith, straight on through. And Jim Schwartz, how dare I forget him. But, I watched Nick Foles walk around the Super Bowl party, and and everyone speaks of him in those terms. And, the quote that Sam Farmer put up on the web, what he said in the aftermath, that I was standing there at the podium and hearing him speak like that. I mean, look, I'm a Joe Flacco guy. You know that. I mean, I wrote a Dear Joe Flacco letter last week. I wouldn't have said that I would have. I understand what the Ravens have done, but I'm a Joe Flacco guy. He won a Super Bowl here. He's one of the greatest stories of my lifetime in Baltimore sports, and the best dude that I've covered. He's my favorite Baltimore athlete. But that being said, time goes, and we got Lamar, and that's cool, and I'm good with that. But I did look at it from the outside and say, where was he going to land, right? And who would want him and who would want Foles and why, right? And would you be less excited about Flacco? I'm just speaking out loud because I do think it's a 1 and 1A. They both have warts that are all over them to the rest of the league, and part of their warts, they now take somewhere else with a lot of money, but a hell of a chip on their shoulder. Both of these guys are maligned to some degree, right? They both just got thrown out of places where they won Super Bowls.
Yeah, no question. And there's not a lot of Super Bowl quarterbacks around. I mean, obviously guys that are being moved, and, I guess you could maybe throw Eli Manning into that category. If a team would take him in that contract, you could probably get him as well in New York, if not this year, certainly after the season. But, there's no question Flacco was being mentioned around here. Those are really the two guys. Teddy Bridgewater was a free agent who obviously re-upped with New Orleans, and that's a different story because he's 26 years of age and he's been injured and has never really played, big, meaningful games the way that Flacco and Foles had. So those were the two, but I think once it was announced that it was John DeFilippo coming over, again, that's where you automatically were able to draw that relationship, that if they were going in that direction as the offensive coordinator, he was fired last year in Minnesota. He ruffled some feathers there. He's a very tough-nosed guy, but Foles speaks very highly of him and vice versa. Flip only has positive things to say about Foles. So, to make this long story kind of shortened it, yes, Flacco was mentioned, but I think the day that it was announced that Flip was coming here, it became basically a one-man show, and it was going to end up being Nick Foles.
Rick Ballou is Ballou1010XL out on Twitter. He's also a sports host at 92.5 there and does all the sideline work with the Jaguars radio network. He's been my friend for a couple of decades. A Bostonian trapped down there in Florida with sand between his toes and a cocktail from time to time as well as the weather heats up and they hit the little white dimple ball, which is a big part of your content and your part of the world there. This was always a great time to be a national host, right? Back in our day where you had baseball start and the draft is white hot. You got basketball and hockey about to go into their real season. We got a Final Four that's interesting. You got the Masters around the corner. And even WrestleMania's got me going this week, Ballou. I'm breaking out some of my old interviews with Stone Cold and Mr. McMahon from back in the day and The Rock and all that stuff. It's just a busy, busy time. But for you, the Masters probably is the biggest thing going on in your part of the world, right?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, we just had the players, a couple of weeks ago, got moved back to March this year for the first time. And in over a decade, it had been in May, but, we saw what happened here, and that great back nine was about as electrifying and honestly maybe the best Players' Championship that I've ever covered. Rory McIlroy won it by a shot, and then you see what happens with the match play and how great that golf has been the last several days. To see what Tiger did even through the weekend was pretty interesting, but here we are now.
We can't talk about him this week. We'll have to talk about him enough next week, right? Literally,
yeah.
Right? That's going to be the story, right?
Yep. Yeah. Now we're 2 weeks away from the Masters, and it's wide open. I mean, it's going to be just incredible. Golf right now is just littered with so many top guns, and I mean, you can really make a case that 25 guys I think could go out and win this year's Masters. And there's going to be someone on Thursday who gets out to that early league. You're like, who's that? That's the way it always seems to be during the first major. But I'm with you between that and everything else that's going on. Heading down the peak here in the NBA and certainly the National Hockey League, which I think is going to be just a phenomenal postseason. A lot of Lightning fans down the road here, bragging about this team, which is really one of the greatest regular season that we've ever seen in this state. What they've been able to do, and Boston lost a 2-goal lead to them just last Wednesday night. That was a tough pill to swallow. So Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, baseball underway. This March and April are just two phenomenal months.
Dude, nobody's a bigger Sox guy than you, all these years later. And, David Lamb's been a friend of mine for as long as I've known you. And every time I would bring him on from Jacksonville, we wind up talking baseball. There's the temperature for baseball in Jacksonville, strangely enough, right? Like, without a team and all that, it feels like there's still some relevance in that market to some degree that people love baseball. Maybe because it's old and white, I don't know. People retire. Florida seems to be that way, although neither one of the franchises can sell tickets down there or get people out. But I'm worried about our franchise here, Rick. I mean, no one's going to go to the games this year. They don't really know what they're doing, from a marketing standpoint and as to how to capture the hearts and certainly not the wallets of people. They have a horrific reputation here. Baseball is not a format in Baltimore anymore. It's not a full-time format. It's not. And yet, when I bring a guy like you on, I know you know everything about the Red Sox because you're glued to it and you're, 1,500 miles away.
Well, I tell you what, right now I love the Baltimore Orioles because you just took 2 out of 3 from the New York Yankees, and thank you for that. The Red Sox, their bats are alive and well, but their pitching really, stunk up the joint, losing 3 of 4 to open up their series out in Seattle, out on the West Coast. But I love baseball, and I hate this for the Baltimore Orioles because I grew up in the American League East, and Baltimore is right there with Boston and New York. It's really the 3 teams I'll always look at in that particular division, and just how great baseball was, let's say, pre-free agency, when you knew every guy on the team, and they were returning each and every season, and the only way that they would be moved along would be if a young guy knocked them off or they were traded. And, sports has changed right in front of our eyes over the decades, but there's something about baseball and opening day, and I just thought baseball blew it this year. I mean, they dropped those couple of games in Japan. I was talking about it with my audience, and it's like, how many people really realized that Oakland and Seattle played 2 games?
I had no idea what was going on. I woke up at 5 in the morning, and I saw, on my timeline, some video of Ichiro walking off the field and caught it, and that was that. I mean, I'm like, wow, it looks like they count, Yeah.
A lot of Braves fans around here. That was the team that was always closest to Jacksonville. This state added a couple of franchises and St. Petersburg and down in Miami. So you got a lot of Braves fans around here, and obviously they got off to a difficult start. Again, their pitching got lit up. Right now they're minus 12 in scoring differential, which
they also sort of skimped after like building that city out, and that is the model that scares me for the Orioles, brother. When people don't want to come downtown and when the stadium's empty and when the lease is up in 3 years after 30 years and, other suitors may be out there in Nashville and Portland, this time around there might be somebody that really wants a team that's willing to build a stadium. We've gone through that period of time in the NFL now. Baseball's been pretty stable for having some turds in places, mainly because nobody wanted the Expos. I mean, the Expos are the worst thing that ever happened to any Oriole fan with this massive money that's all gone in Angelos's pocket, and now, we're going to be accused of not supporting the team. I've been down this road. I lost a football team here when I was a kid, and I'm very, very cognizant of people need to spend money, people need to support it, and no one's going to support baseball here. No one wants to come downtown, and the Braves are the blueprint for how to take your team out to the suburbs and make it work.
Yeah, and it's so disappointing because it's such a great baseball yard. I mean, I came out last week that they haven't announced the dates yet, unless you know them, but it was announced that Baltimore and Jacksonville will practice for a couple of days and then play a preseason game, even though the preseason, opponents and dates haven't been announced. But I'm like, can you give me that date? Because I want to find out if the Orioles are in town for any one of those dates. You practice during the day, Ravens and Jaguars, and get the opportunity to go to Camden Yards at night. So I'm ready for those dates. I was able to do that last year in Minnesota.
I'm ready to take you out for a crab cake, Ballou.
I'm ready to go. I mean, that was great about these practicing with different opponents. A couple of years ago in Foxborough, the Sox were in town. Now this past year in Minnesota, I had a chance to go to that yard and see baseball right there in downtown Minneapolis in the month of August, which was absolutely just a phenomenal time of year. So, I'm hoping that's the same case. Once they announce that date, let's hope the Orioles have a couple of home nights there. That'll be a lot of fun.
Well, crabs, beer. I'll buy the crabs. You buy the beer. We'll find out who gets away better when that's all over. Rick Ballou is here. He's down in Jacksonville. He's been my friend for a couple decades, doing sports radio, doing golf and baseball and football and Jaguars. He does the Jaguars sideline work at 92.5 down there in Jacksonville. You can follow him at Ballou, Ballou. 1010XL and all things Jacksonville. You know, from the outside looking at the league, and I was at the owners' meetings last week, and where we were, I ran into your owner, Shad Khan. I saw him out there for a little bit. The league is, you need a scorecard all of a sudden in a lot of places, right? Including your place with your quarterback and what we're doing on both sides of the ball here and 8 new coaches and all that. The draft is a nice time to do that, right? It's sort of like a nice level-setting educational time between now and the end of the month to learn who the coaches are, who the quarterbacks are, who the coordinators are, and then who they draft. This is sort of the brush-up time for football for me.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. It's and when you get knocked out early, the way that Jacksonville did this past year, you get on that a little bit earlier as far as the draft and free agency a month before, unlike a year ago when they had that great run, to the AFC Championship game before losing to the Patriots. So, a quicker start this year, but, the Jags haven't done a lot outside of Nick Foles. They've added guys that are, basically off the street, and they still got about $15 million. Alfred Ballou was just added to the roster, a division guy who's played his last 4 years in Houston. So they're not going to be able to go out and really make another big splash. They're just trying to put pieces together, but, obviously the attention now is on the NFL draft, and every year we're told there's not a great quarterback, and all of a sudden it becomes a month of the draft, and you see now all these mocks. You could have 4 quarterbacks going in the first 15 picks. So, yeah, I don't like all the movement, Nasty. I just, I'm old school. I like guys staying on the same team. I know you mentioned a bunch of, notable Baltimore Raven guys who are moving on for one reason or another. That's the difference in the big money in sports today that I think is tougher for the fan, because you truly do have to root for the name on the front of the jersey, the back of the jersey, and the heroes you grew up watching. They just go year after year after year. So it's a totally different game compared to when you and I grew up.
See, that's why you like golf, right?
I do. I mean, I love golf. I mean, you blame that or maybe, put it all on him or maybe blame the caddy. But, yeah, absolutely I do. No question.
Enjoy the sunshine down there. I will, at some point on the evening of April 24th, the night before the draft, do a little weather check somewhere in Jacksonville just to see that it was going to be 74 degrees and perfectly sunny. I'm actually hoping it's a horrific weather night so that I'm happy I didn't go, but I just know how it's going to go. I know it's going to be a perfect night in Jacksonville. So whatever you do that night, take the top down and go crank up some brown sugar and some honky-tonk woman or something, but because I will not. And what the most disappointing part, Ballou, this is a kind of a fun, crazy story. I got a random note about 2 years ago from my kindergarten teacher, okay? Miss Wassel.
Yeah.
So I was in kindergarten in 1972, and she wrote me a note and said, I saw online that you were in Jacksonville at the Ravens-Jaguars game. I live in Jacksonville. I'd love to see you. And I wrote her back and promised her that the next time I come to Jacksonville, that I would come. She lives in the town just north of the airport down there. Let me look it up. I'll get the name of the town for you. And she and I were going to have lunch. I was going to have lunch with my elementary school teacher, who I have not seen since 1975, and she knows of me on the internet. She knows of me from the radio, so, and from the internet, and is proud of me, and, all this. She doesn't really know me. If she knew me, she might be less proud of me. But she lives in Yulee, Yulee. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I was
to the Georgia border.
I was going to land and go up to Yulee and see my kindergarten teacher for the first time in 43 years. And
right out there by Amelia Island, Yulee, beautiful part.
Mick Jagger screwed me all up. And it wasn't even Keith. If you had odds whether it would be Keith or Mick, you knew it would be Keith falling out of a tree or something, right?
Well, Keith's going to live until he's like 110, for crying out loud. I think we all know that. Yeah, it's just really a shame because it was going to be a great, really start of the weekend. That would have been a Wednesday night, but Thursday's the draft. So, that building was going to be rocking. We have a big draft night special right there from the stadium as well. So you would have had that concert on that Wednesday night, then the draft first round of it on Thursday, and then you head towards the weekend. But, I'm disappointed as well. I really wanted to see the Rolling Stones here in Jacksonville. So I know it's postponed. Hopefully they'll do it a couple of months later.
Sad, sad, sad is what I say. I'm just waiting on a friend. Rick Ballou has been my friend for 20 years. He is Ballou1010XL out on the Twitter thing. You can follow him and Bobby Bowden and all that Seminole heat down there in Jacksonville. Appreciate you, brother, and hope we get together. And for sure, when this Jaguar-Raven thing happens, come on up, man. We'll make some room. I was always a crab cake for you, man.
Oh, man, I love Baltimore. I love visiting, and let's hope the Orioles have some games. Wouldn't it be great if the Sox were in town? How cool would that be? Sox Orioles in town right there with the Jags and Ravens.
Dude, the Orioles are going to be 45 games under 500 by then.
Well, good. And then by the time the Sox leave, hopefully it'll be 48.
I know you to be sort of a part-time gambling guy. Do you know what the over-under on the Orioles were?
Yeah, I took a long look at it. It was like, 52 or 55 or something crazy like that?
Well, you must have got it early. It was 58. 58.
Yeah.
58.
Yeah. It's just insane.
So
and they're ahead of that pace right now.
If you lose 103 games, you win the bet. I mean, it's crazy, right?
Unbelievable.
Give me an O indeed. He is Rick Ballou. He's down in Jacksonville. You can find him out on Twitter, Ballou1010XL. You can find me in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault. You might hear some wrestling stuff this week. I am unearthing my WrestleMania weekend, in lieu of a real baseball season, and we do have opening day on Thursday, and I will drink, and you will see me there, and I will be an idiot, and I will have some fun. We are doing Baltimore Positive, but I'm going to do a little wrestling this week, so if you hear it on the radio, you hear Stone Cold or Nikolai Volkov or Bobby Backlund or Tony Gurria or Mick Foley or Vince McMahon or Pat Patterson or anything of that sort, it's just because it's WrestleMania and because, opening day ain't what it used to be. I'm in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault. I am also on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking. Wrestling, football, all sorts of stuff in Baltimore sports.